Hello, APUSH students. This is chapter 31, a continuation of the Reagan era, the 1980s. And we're going to talk about who the followers of Reagan were, both for religious reasons, moral reasons, and or economic reasons. Okay. Well, the Reagan Coalition, right? A coalition means a group of various different people who are all joined together for a common purpose. Okay. And let's look at who makes up the Reagan Coalition. Who would want to follow President Ronald Reagan? Well, we have who I talked about last Google Slides presentation, the Christian conservatives or the evangelicals, right? They're also called the moral majority, or they're called the Christian Coalition. So there isn't one specific leader, but there's many different leaders. We also see in the 1980s the rise of televangelists. And if you look at the word televangelist, it is a combination, the word television, right, and evangelism, right? Evangelicalism, I should say, right? Preaching the gospel, preaching the word of God, a strict literal interpretation of the Bible. You have Jim Bakker, Oral Roberts, and Pat Robertson, who are extremely popular, well-known throughout America, who have their own television shows as well, radio stations, radio shows, and they are on TV, and they are asking people for money. And they would say, call this number and donate, and for these reasons, okay? And they were quite anti-secular humanists, right? Which simply means that they were against, excuse me, they were simply against the idea of religion taken out of American society. That one of the major issues is that kids are now growing up not knowing about God, not knowing about Jesus, not knowing about morality, that you're taking religion out of the American experience, both public and private. So you also have neoconservatives, right? Neocons, right? Or the hawks, right? They emphasize free market capitalism, which means basically deregulation, right? Just let the hounds loose, let the businesses do what they want. Whoever makes the best product for the best price will win. They were also war hawks, and so really believed in interventionist foreign policy, right? Getting involved in foreign countries, right? In order usually to protect economic interests, right? That's one of the reasons why we see American spending go up so much in terms of defense spending to stop the spread of communism. Okay. Corporate elites, wealthy business leaders. Why? They want the reins off. They want to be able to do what they want. They want the best possible opportunity to make the most money that they can. Okay. Libertarians, whose political philosophy is simply freedom of choice. Do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't infringe upon others, right? Which basically goes with free market capitalism, goes with deregulation. It really is a philosophy that is guided by personal judgment, okay, and lessens the power of the local and the federal government, right? The least amount that the government does, the more time and effort and ability that you have to make your own choices, the better, okay? Now, if we look at taxes, this is the tax rate over here. And the tax rate especially drops with Ronald Reagan. You see it drop here. You also saw it with JFK as well. So Reagan really has the greatest change to the tax codes going all the way up until the recent tax codes by President Trump. Okay. Now, people say taxes were high. So all of this here, this is the marginal tax rate. So it's basically only the top few percentage of people in America, right? What's their tax rate? So around 40%. And today around the high 30s, okay? But again, this is only for people that make probably about $500,000 a year. But if you notice, the taxes were extremely high, around 90%, end of Truman through the Eisenhower years and JFK, okay? And Eisenhower is a Republican, and the taxes are extremely high. They're still 70% under Johnson. So when people say, oh, taxes are too high, they're not even comparable to what taxes were in the 1950s and early 1960s. Reaganomics, or what someone called it, Voodoo economics, which is basically not a nice way of describing this economic philosophy. So we call it Reaganomics. The official term, right, is supply side economics, right? Now, I'll explain to you in steps. So the American economy is stagnant. It's not moving. It's not improving due to excessive taxation. Because the government is taking so much of your money, you have less money to purchase products. You have less money to start a business. You have less money to develop a business. And that has an overall negative effect on the economy. It also is a deterrent to you because you're saying, why am I going to even make more money if the government is just going to take the money, right? So this is what Reagan does, okay? Corporate taxes, capital gains tax, inheritance taxes, all these different type of taxes are lowered. And the top income level, so a multimillionaire, you would only pay 20% of your income, federal income, in taxes. Whereas you could see in the 1950s, it was about 90%. So taxes are being cut across the board. Corporate means business, capital gains means investments in stocks, inheritance means, right, what's passed down to the next generation. They're all lowered, okay? We also have deregulation, the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so deregulation when it comes to terms of the environment, Department of Transportation when it comes to mostly cars, trains, buses, civil rights also as well. It simply means the government is going to cut the amount of federal workers, the government is going to cut the amount of oversight. Okay, $40 billion was cut into these government welfare type programs, right? Food stamps, student loans, public transportation, welfare itself, the social programs, right, of the Great Society by Baines Johnson, right? Some of them were still in effect, and they're just going to cut them. They're going to gut them by up to $40 billion. Okay, but what happened? How come the budget increased? How come America went into further debt if they're simply cutting back so much? Well, it's increased defense spending. 40% from 1981 through 1985, right? This is what the neocons want, right? It's peace through strength. That the only way that you're going to have a peaceful society is to make sure that you have all the weapons and the modern day technology so that nobody will mess with you. We have a savings and loans crisis from the mid 80s to the mid 90s. Savings and loans crisis are a type of bank, right, which basically is supposed to be a more neighborhood type bank. You have checking account, which gives you a better interest rate. They're allowed to make loans on mortgages and so on. But what happens is it's deregulated. Many of these savings and loans are only taking in small amount of money, but giving large amount of loans away. They're also starting to speculate, which means take really big chances. And what ends up happening is that you literally have thousands of these small banks going bankrupt. Okay. So we have the early crisis in Reagan's years, 80, 81, 82, right? We have 11% unemployment by 1982, which is a jump, which is high. We haven't seen that in the United States until just very recently, obviously, due to the pandemic. Okay. So tax cuts, meaning the government is getting less money from the people because they're paying less taxes. Okay. But we're spending more money because of defense. Okay, so even though all the cutbacks, we're still spending more money, and the national debt is rising, right? In more than 8 years in Reagan's 2 terms than all the previous presidents combined in American history, it goes from 900 billion. That's right, you heard, to 2.7 trillion. That's how much in debt the country was in the 1980s. Don't even want to say how much the country is in debt in 2020. Don't even look it up. It'll blow your mind. Okay? Now, this is what we are going to talk about, okay, in probably the next week, okay? We're going to talk more about the Cold War with Reagan and with President Bush as well, right? So we know Reagan, he is a very strong anti-communist going back to the 1950s, literally, okay? So we're in the 1980s. He calls out the Soviet Union. He calls them the evil empire, right? And he's going to do every single thing he possibly can to destroy this empire, to make sure that communism doesn't spread under his administration. And he proposes this idea. It's called the Strategic Defense Initiative, but really, the press calls it Star Wars. The United States had this idea to literally create a force field over the entire United States, in which if the Soviet Union sent an ICBM, right, intercontinental ballistic missile, it would hit right, this force field, and either be destroyed or bounce off and just fly off into space away from the Earth. Because remember, right now, all the way through in the history, since the atomic bomb was developed, right, in the 1940s, there is basically no direct way to counteract that other than to just shoot your opponent as well. But what does that do? It kills everyone. As Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind. Okay? Now, this never happened. It was a proposal. It never happened. I don't believe any specific money was built towards it, but this idea was put down on paper. And I have read also that the Soviet Union thought that the United States could do this. And if the United States could do this, this would be a game changer because the United States would be the only country in the world that could protect themselves from a nuclear weapon. Okay? So the Reagan doctrine, right? Reagan's foreign idea. Remember, we had the Monroe Doctrine, we had the Eisenhower Doctrine, okay? Reagan's going to support opponents of communism anywhere, regardless of a relationship to the Soviet Union, okay? So it doesn't matter where these countries are, the history of the country between them and the United States, the relationship. We, the United States, are going to support anti-communists around the world. Okay. How did he do this? Well, a couple examples. A tiny little island, okay, in Latin America, right? Send troops to overthrow Grenada, which we did like in a day, okay? In 1979, he's going to support the Contras, right? The anti-communists in Nicaragua, and this is going to be a huge scandal, which we'll get to next, okay? In 1982, though, right, Marines were stationed in Lebanon, right, in the Middle East, in order to protect that government against possible communists. And what happens is that there was a terrorist attack, bombs went off and killed over 240 Americans. And actually, President Reagan told them to come back home, okay? And he withdrew the troops, okay? Now, the 1984 election, okay? It's Ronald Reagan representing, obviously, the Democratic Party. You have Walter Mondale, and for the first time here ever, we have on the final ticket in the general election, we have a woman named Geraldine Ferraro. Okay, many of you probably never even heard of her. Okay, but Mondale, as you could see, did not come close to winning at all. Okay, he lost the popular vote by 18%, and the electoral vote, it's almost impossible to get a higher percentage of the electoral vote unless you sweep every single state in the country. Okay, so what we're saying again here is Reagan kicks butt in 1980. He kicks butt in 1984, but also it helped him that the economy was improving a little bit. That 1984 was the unemployment rate was going down a little bit, the economy is improving, and this is before the savings and loan crisis. So the 1984 election came at a perfect time for Ronald Reagan. Okay, so we definitely see the 1980s, the era of the moral majority, the Christian right, the neocons, the deregulation. Obviously, overall, America seems to be happy with it. Talk to you later. Bye.